Our next teller is Gil Myers. Gil Myers describes himself as a compulsive storyteller. He is a published author and a graduate of WVU's with degrees in journalism and forest pathology. He and his wife live in Hampshire County. Gil's story tonight is called For Heaven's Sakes. I gave you Gil Myers and For Heaven's Sakes.
Maisie was my wife's grandmother. She lived next door to my wife, Sue, all the time she was growing up in Dunbar, West Virginia, a tidy working-class suburb of Charleston, West Virginia. Sue's mom, Dessel, was one of Maisie's daughters. Maisie lived with another daughter named Dolores. Now, how many daughters Maisie had, I was never quite sure. The confusion begins with the fact that all the daughters had names that began with the letter D. There was Dolly and Dottie and Dreama and Darlene and on it went. All the daughters lived within about 2 blocks of Maisie. And so down 3rd Street and looping around to 4th, all the daughters lived, all with names that began with the letter D. Not only did their names sound the same, but the daughters all looked the same. They were all thin, attractive women with the same color of dark hair, to the extent that I suspected that maybe about every 3 weeks, they passed a jug of hair dye down the block so they'd each get a good swig of the youthful appearance. So they looked alike, their names sounded alike, and they acted alike. For example, all the daughters called their mother Maisie. Not once did I ever hear any of them refer to her as mom or mother or mama or any of those sorts of things. It was always Maisie. And every day, the daughters circulated between the kitchen tables at Dessel's house and then over to next door at Maisie and Dolores' house. And at these tables, they all smoked cigarettes a lot. And they drank copious amounts of coffee, and they finished each other's sentences. Now, these sisters were all married, in theory. I say in theory because I rarely saw the husbands. And the events of this particular weekend I want to tell you about points out the wisdom of the phantom behavior of these husbands. It was a typical weekend. My wife and I had driven down to Dunbar from our place in Morgantown, and late afternoon, we're sitting at the kitchen table with Dolly and Dottie and Dessel, and just breathing some secondhand smoke and declining a 14th cup of coffee. Dessel got up to go over to the oven, and she opened it up and brought out a pan, said, "Meatloaf's done." She lifted a lid on a pot on the stove and poked it a little bit with a fork and said, "Potatoes need a little more time." Just as Dessel was returning to her chair, back door burst open and in came Dolores. "Something's wrong with Maisie," she shouted. "Lots of things are wrong with Maisie," said Dolly, although it might have been Dottie. "I'm serious. I think she might be having a heart attack or something." The lack of alarm among the assembled family members was, well, alarming. Dolly, or might have been Dottie, lit a cigarette, and Dessel took a sip of coffee. Finally, I said, "If Grandma Maisie might be having a heart attack, should we maybe call 911? They looked at me like I had suggested we light the house on fire. "Oh, for heaven's sake," said Dolores. "We don't want to cause a scene." All the other sisters nodded. That would be a very bad thing to do. Dolores said, "Sue, you're a nurse. Why don't you go over and see what's wrong with your grandmother?" And Sue said, "I work labor and delivery. Do you suppose she might be pregnant?" "Oh, for heaven's sake," said Dolores. "The woman's 85 years old. Besides," said Dessel, "Harry's been dead for 4 years." Sue got the signal from her mother that she was to go over, and then Sue signaled to me that I was to join her. Now, I was in graduate school in forest pathology at the time. So unless poor Grandma Maisie had fallen victim to Dutch elm disease, I was not going to be a whole lot of help. Nonetheless, I got the signal and I would go. So I thought maybe it was a chance to maybe breathe a little fresh air in the 2-minute walk over to next door. Well, turned out that Dolores was leaving and she had just lit a new cigarette, and Dolly and Dottie decided to come along too in the puffing parade. And so we all went over and went in the back door at Maisie and Dolores's house and looked around. Sue said to her Aunt Dolores, well, where's Grandma? Well, I sent her upstairs, told her to get changed, told her to make sure she has clean underwear on. Sisters nodded at the wisdom of that advice. So Sue and her 3 aunts climbed the narrow stairs off the kitchen, and I just sat at the red Formica table. A little bit, there was commotion coming down the stairs. They brought Maisie down. I held my chair and helped Maisie sit down, even though she had her eyes closed, and she maneuvered that okay. And then into the kitchen, it's about the same time, came Dessel with Danielle. And I said to Sue, what do you think? Is your grandma okay? And she said, well, I'm pretty sure she's not pregnant. You're not pregnant, are you, Grandma? Maisie opened her eyes in confusion and said, Harry's dead. Closed her eyes again. Dessel said, I need to go check the potatoes, and left again. So we sat there for a little while, and I knew better than to suggest 911. Sue said that she thought maybe her grandmother had a mild heart attack and that we should go to the hospital. But the only reaction among the assembled people was another round of cigarettes and a fresh pot of coffee. After a bit, Dessel came back in with Donna, and maybe it was Darlene, and said, I made a decision. I'm going to make mashed potatoes because they'll keep better. Sisters all nodded at the wisdom of this decision. So we sat there, and finally, vaguely, I said, how might we get Maisie to the hospital if she needs to go to the hospital? Oh, for heaven's sake, said Dolly or Dottie. We'll take my car, it's the biggest one. Okay, so we sat there for a while longer, and then Maisie looked up and said, I need to go to the bathroom. Oh, for heaven's sake, said Dolores. We can't get you back up those stairs to the bathroom. Wouldn't be safe, not in your condition. One of the sisters suggested a coffee can. Dolores said, oh, for heaven's sake, I just mopped the floor. What if she misses? Other sisters suggested a mop bucket. I suggested, I'll wait outside. But Dottie or Dolly, one of them, said, well, go get my car. I said, okay, where is it? It's in front of my house. Keys are in it. It's gray Buick Century. So Sue gave me a little bit better advice, lest I commandeer the wrong vehicle to serve as our ambulance. But I went and got it and pulled up into the front of the house. And then after a few minutes, this whole gaggle of dark-haired women came ushering Maisie toward me. They opened the front passenger door and pushed Maisie in, and Sue's mother said, Sue, you're the nurse, you sit next to her. But then Dessel got in next to her. So Maisie's knees were now jammed up under the gear shift. The back doors opened, and countless dark-haired women crowded into the back seat, and all lit cigarettes. Before I could get the car into gear, visibility in the car was near zero. So I cracked the front window a little bit to try to get some airflow, when in unison from the back seat came, oh, for heaven's sake, you're creating a draft. The poor woman's having a heart attack. You need to get going. We need to get her to the hospital. My wife said, go down to the stop sign, turn left. At the hospital, at the emergency room door, our clown car erupted in dark-haired women, spewing everywhere. After a long wait in the hospital, we were informed by a doctor that Maisie had, in fact, had a mild heart attack. She'd be okay, but she'd need to spend the night. As for the rest of us, we went back to Dessel's house and had meatloaf and mashed potatoes and coffee, for heaven's sake. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Gil, for that wonderful story.